His last words were that of sheer terror.
It's hovering above me, and it's not an aircraft.
Then, only static. For 46 years, the skies over Bass Strait have guarded aviation's most chilling mystery. This is the true story of Frederick Valentich, a young pilot who vanished into thin air after a terrifying encounter. Frederick Valentich was a man with a dream, but also a curious fascination that stretched far beyond the conventional. At just 21 years old, back in 1978, he was a moderately experienced pilot, driven by an immense passion for aviation. He had already logged over 150 hours of flight time and possessed a Class 4 instrument rating, allowing him to fly without visual ground references. This was in an era when general aviation was booming, offering a sense of freedom and adventure to those who took to the skies. Yet, beneath his confidence, Valentich harbored a unique interest. He was a true UFO enthusiast, even carrying around that type of literature in his flight bag, a fascination that would soon terrifyingly intertwine with his own destiny. Though ambitious, he had faced a few setbacks, being rejected from the Royal Australian Air Force due to below-average academic results and medical reasons, perhaps fueling his desire to prove himself on the civilian side. His deeply concerned parents were aware of his independent nature and the risks of flying at night. They had even warned him about this prior to his final flight, and on the evening of Saturday, October 21st, 1978, Frederick embarked on a seemingly routine training flight in his single-engine Cessna 182L light aircraft, registered VH-DSJ. His plan? A 125-mile trip from Moorabbin Airport near Melbourne to King Island over the Bass Strait. This was a place he had visited many times before. Known for its peaceful windswept landscapes, it was a remote and rugged outpost at the time. Conditions were ideal, minimal headwinds, clear visibility, and the sun began to set. All the promisings of a safe and easy flight. With that in mind, he took off at around 6:19 p.m. with enough fuel to stay in the air for about 5 hours. This was more than enough to get him there. In addition to this, his flight plan called for him to check in via radio at certain checkpoints along the way. At around 7 p.m., he reported Cape Otway in sight, his first of several designated checkpoints. Everything was proceeding along as normal. But as he flew towards his next checkpoint over the vast and dark expanse of the Bass Strait, something beyond explanation was about to enter his airspace. At 7:06 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time, just as twilight deepened over the Bass Strait, Frederick radioed Melbourne Flight Services, connecting with ground controller Steve Roby. Roby, a veteran controller, answered calmly. Valentich's voice, initially professional, began to carry a note of a growing concern.
Melbourne, this is Delta Sierra Juliet. Is there any known traffic below 5,000?
Roby, after a quick check, confirmed,
No known traffic.
But Valentich insisted. He could now clearly see a large, unknown aircraft about 1,000 feet directly above him, illuminated by 4 bright landing lights. It moved with impossible speed, passing directly over him at high speed several times. Roby, baffled by the lack of radar contact, asked for confirmation. Valentich replied,
Unknown due to its speed it's traveling. Is there any Air Force aircraft in the vicinity?
This reply from air traffic control was chillingly simple.
No known aircraft in the vicinity.
For the next 6 minutes, the radio transmission became a mysterious chronicle of a pilot facing the inconceivable. Valentich reported the object was playing some sort of game with him, executing maneuvers that were impossible for conventional aircraft. It flew over him 2 to 3 times at speeds he couldn't identify. He described it as long in shape, and it was like it was chasing him. In a desperate attempt to identify it, he tried turning his plane around and flying circles directly beneath it. He described it as metallic, like it was shiny on the outside with a big green light. It began mirroring his movements, orbiting over top of him. Some interpretations of his words even suggest he described the object as tumbling or wobbling, adding another layer of bewilderment to its behavior. He stressed that the object was extremely powerful. It seemed to exert an unknown influence on his aircraft, causing it to react. And at 7:11 p.m., Valentich reported engine troubles. The engine had been rough idling.
I've got it set to a 23, 24, and the thing is coughing.
This was very alarming. Roby, still trying to understand the unknown aircraft, pressed him one last time to be able to identify it. Valentich's final words, filled with terror, would echo throughout the history of aviation.
Melbourne, that strange aircraft is hovering over top of me again. It's hovering, and it is not an aircraft.
At precisely 46 seconds past 7:12 p.m., the transmission from his plane completely cut off. The sudden silence from a live flight was ultimately deafening. Melbourne's flight services immediately escalated the situation, declaring an alert. When Valentich's aircraft did not arrive to King Island at 7:33 p.m., the distress phase was officially declared, triggering a desperate and massive search. For 4 days, a vast flotilla of search vessels crisscrossed the Bass Strait, joined by numerous search planes from the Royal Australian Air Force and even the U.S. Navy. They scoured his last known location as well as the entire intended flight path, in calm conditions with perfectly good visibility. Despite the unprecedented scale and intensity of these efforts, not a single trace was ever found of the Cessna or Valentich. No wreckage, no debris, no oil slick, no life raft, and no identifiable piece of the aircraft. The plane was even equipped with an emergency locator transponder, designed to automatically activate upon impact and emit a distress signal. But the ELT had never been activated, or it was never heard. It was as if the pilot and the plane had simply been erased from existence, swallowed by the sky and seas. This complete and ultimate lack of evidence only deepened the enigma. 5 years later, in 1982, a cow flap from a Cessna 182 washed ashore on Flinders Island near the search area. While it was the same type of plane, investigators ultimately could not definitively determine that it belonged to his aircraft, as other Cessna 182s had flown over the area in the past and lost similar parts. The official investigation by the Australian Department of Transport was ultimately unable to determine the cause of his disappearance, concluding only that it was presumed to be fatal. But the lack of wreckage and the haunting final transmission left the door wide open for far more unsettling and extraordinary conclusions, pushing the boundaries of what could be explained. With no wreckage and a chilling final transmission that echoed into the void, the disappearance of Frederick Valentich became a cornerstone of unexplained aviation mysteries, sparking decades of speculation. The sheer nature of the case invited every possible explanation, from the completely mundane to the truly extraordinary. Some official-leaning theories suggested spatial disorientation. Perhaps Valentich, an experienced pilot, became disoriented, mistaking bright celestial objects like Venus, Mars, and Antares for landing lights of other aircraft. Due to this, he may have rotated and began flying upside down towards the water, thinking that it was the sky. This theory faces significant challenges. The Cessna 182L had a gravity-fed fuel system. If the plane were truly inverted for more than just a few seconds, the engine would have stopped working altogether, not just idling roughly as Valentich described. And notably, Valentich himself reported seeing the lights of an object, not just stars. Another idea proposed a visual illusion, perhaps reflections of his own plane lights on a low cloud layer or even the ocean's surface created a mirage. But this theory too struggles to explain the complex maneuvers he described the object was making as it was directly above him, or why it appeared to mirror his own craft's movements with such precision. Some even suggest that the metallic scraping sound was the sound of the propeller hitting the aircraft, indicating an immediate crash. But again, no wreckage was ever found, and the last 17 seconds of sound after his last words suggest something more prolonged than an instant impact. Another theory is that of a proposed carbon monoxide leak from a faulty exhaust system. This could lead to disorientation, hallucinations, and erratic behavior consistent with some of his actions. However, this theory also struggles to explain why there was no wreckage and why the transmission was so specific about an external object. His Cessna had such unusual engine problems that seemed to be linked to the object's presence. More cynical theories suggested Valentich staged his own disappearance, perhaps trying to escape some sort of problem or engage in drug smuggling. However, his enthusiasm for flying, his lack of financial troubles, and the likelihood of successfully faking such a disappearance in a Cessna with no trace to be found make this difficult to believe. The complete lack of a body or wreckage defies an easy explanation. The most captivating and terrifying theory remains the one that Frederick himself suggested: a genuine encounter with an unidentified flying object, an extraterrestrial craft. Many witnesses that night reported seeing unusual activity in the sky around the time and location of his disappearance. Erratic green lights and even a larger object descending with a smaller plane. Valentich's own father, Guido Valentich, steadfastly believed that his son was abducted. This theory explains the unknown aircraft's impossible maneuvers, its metallic appearance, the green light, and the complete disappearance of his plane. It suggests Frederick Valentich wasn't just lost, that he was taken. More than 4 decades later, no definitive evidence has emerged to solve this chilling mystery. His final haunting transmission remains one of aviation's most enduring enigmas, a terrifying glimpse into something that was truly unknown, that simply swallowed a pilot and his plane from the sky, leaving behind only the cold, hard questions of the unexplained.